You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, February 18th, 2022. I'm kind of excited, even though this is more your bag right now.
Why?
Square has finally been, Square Enix, sorry, has been released a trailer for Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. And it looks all right. It sounds all right. I know that much. It sounds pretty damn good.
So I know that I complain about people that nitpick shit. And in fact, I have a friend who asked me about Final Fantasy V Remaster, and he later messaged me like, oh, some weird thing, like, oh, some of the sprites didn't bounce properly. When, and I was like, whatever, dude. And then the actual Final Fantasy Twitter account released a little clip of, like you do, of Sabin suplexing the Phantom Train.
Oh, yeah,
and immediately I noticed that the sprite for the Phantom Train wasn't the right, like, it doesn't flip when he's suplexing it. And part of me was like, well, I guess they can't get it right.
For those that don't know, there's a character in Final Fantasy VI named Sabin Figaro, or Mash in the Japanese.
Mash Figaro, I believe.
And he's a melee fighter, a monk, I guess.
Well, he's a professional wrestler, man.
And his gimmick in Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy III, when it was originally released in the United States, is that you can put in Street Fighter-like inputs, but not as precise, or maybe too precise. And he can do like little fighting game moves. And one of those moves is a suplex, where he picks up an enemy, jumps up off the screen, and falls back down. And usually he's grabbing the little sprite of the enemy and he's dropping them on their heads, and so the sprite is upside down. And you can use those moves on boss enemies, and there is a boss in Final Fantasy VI that is a train.
So it's actually a pretty common thing of like, oh, you can suplex the train.
Yes.
So that's why it's like when I saw that little video, it was like, oh, I guess they fucked that up, because it shows the animation of the little sprite picking up the other sprite, launching off camera,
picking up the train, yes,
the train sprite,
the engine technically,
launching off camera, and then coming back with it still in the same
right side up,
orientation, and it's like, oh, what, and so I had that moment where I was like, oh no, I'm that guy where I'm like upset that they couldn't get that one thing right. I will say that one thing is one that, like, it's a meme, like it's a cultural thing where people talk about suplexing the train. So the fact that they're like, oh, the developer, the team that developed it, like, didn't realize that is like, okay, it's fine. Like, it's not going to ruin the game.
You still can suplex the train.
It doesn't look right, but but again, it doesn't matter.
Right. For the memes, man. Come on.
I just had that moment where I was like, well, they can't get it right. And I felt like every fucking grognard on the internet when I was like, well, they can't get it right.
Well, I guess I'm even technically worse when it was a month ago when they released a short clip of the opening cinematic, for lack of a better word, of Final Fantasy VI, where Terra and is it
Vixen Wedge or Biggs and Wedge?
Yeah, Biggs and Wedge in their Magitech armor, these large mechs basically are walking towards the town called Narsh, which is this town built up on basically a mountainside. I saw it, I'm like, oh, this looks really good. And the thing about the cinematic is you're kind of the camera's behind the marching mechs. And due to atmospheric perspective and mode 7? One of those modes, scrolling, the town is slowly revealed. Actually, I might be parallax scrolling. The town is slowly revealed in the background. In the original game, it's like this big kind of like sheer cliff side. It's almost like it's a square drop all the way down, and they're kind of like plateau mountains, for lack of a better word. They're all very flat on top, with sheer drops down the side, and the city is built up into that. And in the released footage, they made him into like Rocky Mountain style and Sierra Nevada style mountain range. We're very like pointy peaks. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I realized that I'm being a shithead. But
it is that funny thing where, and we continue to talk about what it means, for an identity of things, of a medium of a story. And here we are, like, being problematic dorks where we're like, oh no, they didn't get this little detail right. It's ruined. Although
Hashtag save Narsh.
I'd like to acknowledge that we both realized that probably we're being ridiculous.
Right, because like the snow effects look really good. The music sounds amazing. And I'm sitting there going like, those are the wrong mountains.
Yeah. Well,
and you're like, that train's not upside down.
Train's not upside down. Yeah. It's like ruined. Although, and then that's the joke. Like I never actually did the thing. I never suplexed the train. So the fact that like that to me, it's like, well, you missed that. But I mean, this is always a thing with, we live in the culture of reboots and rehashes, and there's always going to be that feeling. Like I think back to Star Trek Discovery. I was explaining to friends how, I actually like the show. I really think it gets good, really good. But the first season was a bit rough. Wasn't like TNG season 1 rough, but like one of the complaints I had was that, like there are certain things that like, it didn't feel quite right, and I realized like, but it's fine. It's
fine. I mean, speaking of things getting turned upside down and it's still feeling weird, let's go back into the world of NFTs, Andrew, because they finally maybe have infected the realm of tabletop gaming. Bring us that news story, Andrew.
Well, so this is a multi-tiered thing.
Just like a pyramid scheme?
So really, Twitter was kind of just discussing NFTs in role-playing games. And I think there were two different places where it started. One was that a company, Chaosium, the publisher of Call of Cthulhu and similar games, basically said, hey, we're selling NFTs of art, I think. I don't know. And actually, they did this.
That's what Lovecraft would have wanted.
They did this thing months ago, but like no one really noticed. and then suddenly people saw it like, oh shit. That started a discussion of like, wait a second, tabletop game companies, are you like, is this the thing you're going to try to do? On the other hand, there was a discussion, a Twitter thread about someone who basically this group started a DAO, a digitally autonomous organization. It's an NFT crypto thing where they basically have this like, it's like a group that somehow is like operates on the blockchain, but the whole thing is they were trying to basically create blockchain magic card trading, like virtual magic card trading. And Wizards of the Coast, like they do, served a cease and desist. And in the cease and desist, there was this comment that everyone interpreted as like, oh, this is Wizards acknowledging that they're trying to sell NFTs of Magic, or they're thinking about it, selling NFTs of Magic the Gathering. Now, full disclosure, Hasbro, the corporate owner of Wizards of the Coast, does sell NFTs for Power Rangers memorabilia or something. I don't know. So it was this idea that the big company has already gotten into this. So because of that, like there's a lot of discussion on Twitter. And that's actually why in the last week, if you look at Twitter, Pathfinder 2nd edition was trending. Like, why was it trending? Well, basically, a lot of people were like, oh, shit, is Wizards going to ruin D&D by selling NFTs?
Sure.
And it's a weird reaction, right? To see a community generally say like, well, then looking at this thing, and I think a lot of people, at least on Twitter, that play D&D are like, oh no, we all know that NFTs are garbage. Like we know that crypto is just a scam. And so a lot of people said, hey, this is bad. So what do we do? Like, how do we respond to the company that publishes the game that we like to play is trying to get into a confidence scam?
So these DAO groups are seemingly separate completely from WotC, from Hasbro. They're just doing their own thing, and we're basically stealing intellectual property to mint NFTs.
Well, because they were using, they're using copyrighted imagery, I guess.
Right.
Content.
Another reason why NFTs aren't good for the artists, but go ahead.
Right, they're not, because and DAOs, the whole, as I understand it, I've tried to research this, is it's the idea that you create because Ethereum specifically, and I think some of the blockchains have the ability, and this is, I think, mostly overblown, that you can have like contracts in the blockchain. And that's like a weird thing to say because I don't think it's actually really well. What if a tech person says there's a contract? Meh? You know, like a lawyer didn't actually, sign off on this or even be involved.
Right.
But they try to head this idea that there's a contract in the blockchain. So the idea that you can like, oh, I'm going to buy into this DAO, this digitally autonomous organization. And because it's in this blockchain with these digital contracts, there are systems in place such that it will behave in a certain way. Like, oh, if we like, so actually there's a story a little while ago about people that got into a DAO to buy the book of what's his name's Dune.
Frank Herbert.
No, the
no. Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Jodorowsky's Dune, where they'd seen that one of the original like 10 books or whatever that he had produced.
The storyboard
collections. They'd seen one was on sale, so they created a DAO where people could buy into it with the idea that it was only for the purpose of buying this book. And if it didn't work out, then it would get kicked out. Like the people would like I guess they'd get their investment back or something. And so that's the idea. The DAO, that's the idea, is that you can create this thing where it has these basically perfunctory rules of we're only here to do this one thing or whatever. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's fine.
Right.
So that's, I guess, what this magic people were trying to say. But the more interesting thing is that they attracted the attention of big wizards, and big wizards basically said, "Get bent."
Big wizards lawyers, it sounds like first,
but they like it raised that question of, what if your favorite role playing game company tried to sell NFTs? And it does go back because, for me, it raises another question. The Super Bowl happened last week. I don't watch it, but I know a lot of people describe the Super Bowl this year as, in terms of advertisements, as, what it was like, 20 years ago with the .coms, where suddenly you see all these .coms you've never heard of paying millions of dollars for advertisements. And then a year later, the bubble burst. And that's kind of the idea. Like that you see guys like Matt Damon and Larry David selling crypto on Super Bowl commercials.
Right. Seeing Paris Hilton and Jimmy Kimmel talk about NFTs and the Bored Apes they bought on the Tonight Show or whatever show he hosts. It's like, what is going on? And they both seem bored and completely clueless.
They both seemed like bored apes. Yeah.
Right. Well, with a lot of that, the actor stuff, apparently, from what I've heard, I should verify this, but CAA, like the world's biggest talent agency, to which a lot of big actors belong, have invested in Ethereum, I believe. It's interesting because, a lot of the discourse, especially in for me as like an online artist, and then seeing NFTs being embraced by comics, by video games, like we've been talking about this for probably over a year at this point.
Yeah, we have.
And we're like, why isn't, and there have been multiple points where like, this is when the bubble bursts, but then it never seems to burst.
In fact, it seems like it's getting worse.
Maybe, yeah. It just always seems bad. It's just a different kind of bad.
No, that's fair. It just, but it does, like, for me, I've thought a lot about this, because a lot of people were very public on Twitter, RPG Twitter, saying like, well, if Wizards of the Coast leans into NFTs, maybe I'll stop playing D&D, which is why Pathfinder 2nd Edition started trending, because people are like, well, what's the out? If you play elf games and you want an elf game that isn't trying to sell you garbage.
By elf game, you mean not like a little game called Elf Game?
No, that's what game? Twitter people call D&D. It's your elf. Okay. That's the disparaging term for D&D. Oh, your elf game. Yeah, because when people take it too seriously, you're like, oh, come on, let's not freak out about this elf game. But it does, there is that thing. Like, I mean, I think a lot about like Matt Damon. I always thought he was a cool actor. But he's selling, he did commercials for crypto.com. Yeah. And that's that kind of thing where I compare it to something a friend was discussing today. What's his name? Tom Cruise, right? That if you know that like Tom Cruise like is literally like knee deep in Scientology. So like
Oh,
maybe
he's deeper than his knees, my
right,
friend.
but like, and so like you're like, well, I don't want to support his film because he's supporting this big fraud. And so now Matt Damon is also supporting a fraud. So is Larry David. So are these, Brie Larson, Jimmy, not Kimmel? Jimmy Kimmel. Is it Jimmy Kimmel?
Oh no, sorry. It was my bad. Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon. So
yeah, Jimmy Fallon.
I forget which one.
It was Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton talking about.
Right, but like, so you get that place where like, how do I feel that these celebrities, and not that like whatever, that just people that make TV, but how does one feel when like they're literally selling you a con job?
It's for me, it's hard to hold stuff against them because for a couple of reasons. One, they see a paycheck, and their job, their literal day job is to do what they're told to do, right?
So are you suggesting that Matt Damon was not paid in crypto?
I don't care. He was paid, and he's like, does it turn into money in my bank account? I don't think he gives a shit either way.
Why no? But that's a question. Like, do you think the guy selling you crypto was paid in crypto?
Probably not.
No, probably not.
Right. The other thing is, especially because the Matt Damon thing, was that in the Super Bowl? Because I remember,
the Matt Damon thing was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry David was the Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl. So I remember a couple famous people, be it actors or comic people or musicians, I remember this happened to, came out and was like, hey, this NFT thing sounds like there's some cool opportunities here. And then the internet gave them a tongue lashing. And then either a lot of these people apologized or said, well, I've learned a lot, and maybe I didn't know as much about crypto and NFT as I thought I did. And like a lot of people that have come out and said, yeah, these things are pretty cool, thinking probably it's not understanding how sort of serious a problem it is, thinking it's just another sort of hype train to get on and be a part of, a trend, for lack of a better word, are being educated when they go public. Whether it's a very in-your-face kind of public announcement like being in a commercial for crypto.com, or just something stupid of just like mentioning it on Twitter, the internet seems to be, at least a lot of the internet seems to be ready to educate people when it's clear they probably aren't fully aware of what it is they're talking about. So what I'm saying is I think I don't hold it against a lot of these actors because they're hired for a job, and then they think, and the people that hired them probably made it sound great and fun. Once they get their paycheck and the work they made is out there, that's when they get the backlash, and they still got paid, but hopefully they're a little more educated about this whole thing than they were before. It reminds me of like what happened with Gumroad a couple weeks ago, which is another side of this, because they're a vendor, right? That, well, the whole Gumroad thing is a different conversation, because a lot of back channel talking and sharing of private information, which leads me to kind of what I wanted to talk, one of the angles I want to talk about on this. Like, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Hasbro is in the NFT game, if WotC were thinking about entering the game, if all these big corporations that are beholden to, investors and the stock market or whatever, it does not surprise me that they're thinking about this or are considering it, have made plans around NFTs, because they should. That's what a big corporate greedy business does, right? They see what the trends are, and then they plan to take advantage of that so they can keep making money. But they got to pay the consequences for those actions, whether it's the environmental consequences, which is one of the things I'm most worried about, to obviously the grift that especially NFTs are.
Right.
I don't know. It's just not surprising for me to hear that things that like Hasbro has been doing this, or that WotC was even considering it. I don't know if they were, but to hear any of these companies even considering it, like, of course they are, because that's where a lot of conversation, attention, and money is.
It's a weird thing, because we, culturally still subscribe to this idea that I've known people that talk about the boycott of Nestle from 1970X, right? They're killing babies, right? And we still subscribe to that culturally. We pretend like that still happens, even though we see big companies just literally killing people. And we're like, oh, we'll boycott it, except no one does, because at this point we're all in too deep, right? Like
the precious minerals in you that make your phones go and shit.
Right.
That's like basically blood diamonds. Like
it's all fucked. All the products. So like we still talk about that. Like, oh, we can still boycott. And so for me, it does feel like when I see like Chaosium, who like, hey, we're gonna sell this NFT shit, and now just this week they're like, okay, well maybe that was a mistake. We're not gonna do that.
They lost some points in their sanity,
right? And that's the thing where I still like it doesn't work, but I want to believe it does, right? So when I see people say, like, when I see a lot of D&D people saying like, well, maybe I'll stop even participating in the D&D economy, right? I'll stop, which is like a big thing, like, because D&D is a monolithic, it's the elephant in the room. Like people, there's whole other conversations about, yes, there are other role-playing games, but D&D is the one that commands the space. Like if you want to be an indie developer and if you don't develop D&D, you're not really developing, right? Because it's like you can develop a D&D, you can develop garbage in D&D and get thousands of people buying it. And you could develop, the finest art in other places, and good luck, because it's a matter of audience. So that's why, like, when people say, "Oh, well, I guess I'm going to stop doing D&D," I'm going to stop. Like, it's interesting. I don't know if people mean that, but it starts a conversation. Like, D&D is Wizards of the Coast is going to sell NFTs. That's the belief people have, and suddenly people are like, well, shit, not only am I going to say no to that, I'm going to actively start researching alternatives, to the point where, again, Pathfinder 2nd Edition was trending on Twitter for like 2 or 3 days, to the point where people were like, whoa, it's still trending,
right?
Like, wow, what's going on?
It's interesting because it makes me wonder what tabletop NFTs would look like, not because I'm interested in not because I want to buy one, but because tabletop gaming can straddle two worlds in a sense. Like there's a lot of the NFTs out there are like, here's one of 400 minted pieces of concept art or whatever shit we did, right? But then there's also, like, when I think of gaming and what Ubisoft and was it Ubisoft? Activision, EA, it must have been EA. They were looking for more pragmatic NFTs. Like if you buy this NFT of a gun, like you can, this is the promise at least, which is complete bullshit and horse shit, all the shits. Then you can like import this gun into any game and use it. It's your gun. I wonder kind of which direction tabletop gaming NFT assholes would go. Like, is it stuff that actually impacts gameplay, or is it like, oh, here's,
well, it can't be, right?
Right.
Like, it can't be. And this actually, like, is someone who's a make-believe game designer.
Well, just like the NFTs in a video game, it can't work.
Well, like that can't work for a different reason, right?
Right.
I always joke that I knew a guy that talked about conversations that happened at Wizards of the Coast during 4th edition D&D, where this idea that, like, oh, we'd have the character builder, and people would pay money for the item, like, oh, if you want to buy the cool sword, you'd pay 99 cents. And it's like, well, they don't need that. They can they can just write the +1 item on their character sheet, because it's not a game that requires, like, there are
physical things.
There are benefits to having the digital space. But selling individual items is like, oh, you'll need this if you want to play good. Like, no, that's not how this works.
Right. You mean you wouldn't be impressed if someone walked up to the table and like pulled out their crypto wallet of all their...
like, oh, I've got all the coolest characters. And you're like, what? Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, that's a character I made and posted on the internet for free. What the fuck?
Right. So it boils back down to, there is no reason why. Again, I've said this many times. Blockchain generally is a solution desperately in search of a problem.
I've heard in some of the discussion around this, like, that people are distinguishing between NFTs and blockchain, and like the blockchain technology has viable uses. Is that excuses from everything you can come up with, or is that valid?
That's always going to be a discussion. So there's a video, I think I commented a week or two ago that I watched. The video was that the line goes up, which is some YouTubers commentary about blockchain stuff. But there's this idea, right, that the root of blockchain has at it that, like, what if we had a way to track things where we trusted nobody, right? And the problem is, and that's
I love cynicism.
Well, and it's like, oh, okay, that's an idea, but one of the things that you find as you pick at it is that why would I want a system where I trust nobody?
Right.
Because as it ends up, we've discovered that, like, there's reasons to have banks or financial institutions that handle this stuff, because like, if you trust nobody and you get defrauded, well, then that's your fault, right?
Right.
Like, if you get defrauded in our normal banking institution, you go to your bank and they halt payment, right? They're like, oh, you got defrauded? Let me stop the payment and we'll figure it out. And oh yeah, that was wrong. You don't have to pay for that. Right. So it's like, oh, that sounds good, but again, there's the argument that it comes out of this kind of libertarian post economic crash of 2008. Like, oh, we can't trust the system because it was too regulated, is the argument made in one of these videos.
And then extending to sort of fascist paranoia of, well, then we don't trust anybody, right? And that's the thing, because not to get into that, but like what you're doing is it's self-immolation. Without trust, you don't have society, which means you don't have culture, which means you don't have civilization.
Which is where you get into, the prepper libertarian culture, which
that they all decided they liked because they watched The Walking Dead.
Right. And that's that weird thing of
it's LARPing. It's that, but
we've discussed Fallout a lot of, what does society look like when it fails?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that argue that, like, actually it looks like people helping each other, because when the chips fall, that's what we have to do.
Right.
We actually, the whole, like, I hoarded toilet paper for 3 years, that's not functional. But that is the heart of crypto. I mean, at its best, that is the heart of crypto. At its worst, it is just
a money laundering tool.
It's just a money laundering and a grift. It is the biggest grift, and is the video I was talking about. The line goes up. They make the comment that
link in the description.
They make the comment that the rug pulls, right? The fake crypto stuff, like the bullshit NFTs, the ones that are just here to steal your money, they're actually indistinguishable from the ones that are ostensibly legitimate. Right? Because the culture is the same. And now I think what he's suggesting in the video, and I think what is true, is that at the end of the day, they're all the grift. But, like, the idea that right now, if you believe that, like, the Bored Ape Yacht Club is real, it has some value, it is indistinguishable from the one that after 3 days will disappear and take your money. Like, the way they interact with you, the way they sell it, the way they describe it, they're the same. So it just becomes this thing of, like, well, if I can't tell you how the fake thing and the real thing are different, if I can't tell, and even after having bought the thing, like, imagine, right? Like, I went and bought groceries, and I can't tell if I bought fake groceries or real groceries. Or if I bought, if I bought fake stuff or real stuff. You just can't tell until you've actually been fleeced. And that is the crypto economy.
Currently, WotC not going into crypto.
No, I don't think so. I mean, they've not said anything. I don't know, right? Like, but also I don't care. I don't play WotC games. I assume they're not because they've not said that they are, I guess.
Good times for everybody. What was that? What's that famous Arthur C. Clarke? I think it's Arthur C. Clarke axiom.
Sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
No, that's not it. It's sufficiently advanced NFTs are indistinguishable from fake ones. I think something like that, right? Yeah.
Well, again, that assumes that there's a real NFT, or like a real purpose.
I mean, it's non-fungible, so
like that assumes that there's ever a purpose other than the grift.
So, if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media at our respective handles. On Twitter, you can find Andrew at Profound Dark, at seeing him tweet about and share tweets about the very conversant and interesting tabletop community. You can also find me on Twitter at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website, you can also check out our YouTube page, which, as I understand, now features our podcast
episodes. Yeah, I don't think they post at the same time. I think it takes some time to actually kind of. I don't know what it does. It's all that stuff that's behind the scenes, but they get up there.
Turn it into an NFT.
Yep. We're minting new episodes every week. Get yours today. We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae. The other is called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.fieldmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 by attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like YouTube or the Apple Podcasts app. Definitely not any others, although you can find us at other places, I'm sure. What would help us out even more would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, be it a like, a comment, or using their proprietary metric. Either way will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. I just want to wrap up today, Andrew, with the thought I've been having. I don't know if you noticed this, but sometimes some crimes go slipping through the cracks, like batshit adaptations of beloved animated television franchises.
So it's funny. I got a text message the other day from a friend saying, "Oh, here's this new trailer to watch," and I looked. It said. Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. I was like, damn, yeah, let's see what that is. And then I watched the trailer, and it was for a different movie. It was for apparently some sort of weird Roger Rabbit movie, which is not bad. Like, it just, I don't think.
So coming to streaming service Disney Plus, a Rescue Rangers live action movie is coming. I don't even know.
But yeah, we don't know. It's just weird because it's not a
It has
parody.
Chip and Dale. No, it's kind of like a meta.
Yeah, it's a meta
narrative
movie where it's about them making, I guess,
or something. Yeah, and so it's Chip and Dale, and 35 years has passed in the real world, except they're like Roger Rabbit is a really good touchstone, and they actually make that touchstone in the movie of like, it's like all these cartoons, especially these Disney cartoons, exist in the same world and they're interacting with each other, and I don't know, man. It's like it seems, I love that they're breaking any sort of preconceptions and any sort of, they're not following any rules, and that's awesome. I want to see just like a movie like just do what it wants. But man, I don't know if I want to see them do that with Rescue Rangers. I mean, it's kind of my jam. But so I don't know. We'll put the trailer in the show notes. It is insane.
And these two gumshoes
are picking up this. Are they? I don't know. Are they even gumshoes in the show?
It's weird. It is weird.
It's so weird, man. I don't know. The thing is, like I said, I like that it's something that's taking risks, breaking rules. That's what I liked about the not to always come back and beat this drum, but the latter day Fox X-Men films. But then there's the other side of me. It's like, I'm watching this. I'm like, is this Rescue Rangers? Is this, to me, and this is me being selfish, is this to me what Rescue Rangers is and should be, especially when there are such amazing adaptations of other Disney afternoon shows like DuckTales. Let's be real. Right. Like what we saw of Darkwing Duck in that show, and like, I don't know, and even very obvious nods to Rescue Rangers in that show as well. Let us know, because I don't know. It's just a big question mark. I am flabbergasted, is what I am. So, until a movie trailer flabbergasts you, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Esplund.
And for all intents and flabbergasts,
that was a podcast.
That was a flabbergast. That was a flabbercast. Oh, shit.
That was a flabbercast.
We finally came up with a title for our show. For our podcast. We are the Flabbercast. Now I'm recording.
I'm recording too.
There we go. That's how you make a podcast, kids. Is that 1B or 2? I'd say 2.
2.
Otherwise, it'd be Flabbercast, and that's... That just sounds like Guy Fieri with a fat lip.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Do we see any more of those space wontons?
No.